Stop. Do not scroll. I'm serious. Because what I'm about to say is not motivational, it's not inspirational, and it's definitely not safe for everyone to hear. In fact, most people are not supposed to hear this. That's why this message feels heavy. That's why your heart sped up. That's why something inside you said, wait, listen. Here's the shocking truth nobody warned you about. God has already given you a spiritual gift. Not someday, not later, already, yes, you. And before you say, not me, I'm not special, listen very carefully. That thought alone is proof you were targeted, not forgotten. Because here's the terrifying part. If a spiritual gift is ignored long enough, it doesn't disappear. It goes dormant, it turns inward, and it starts working against you. That's why some people feel stuck for years. That's why life feels heavier for you than others. That's why you felt different since childhood. 99% of people will live and die, never activating what God placed inside them. They carry the gift, but they never unlock it. And here's the part that should scare you. Once the window closes, it doesn't reopen easily. Opportunities expire, callings get reassigned, potential gets buried under fear. And now, listen closely. You wouldn't be watching this video unless you were marked to hear it. Algorithms don't explain this. Timing doesn't explain this. Luck doesn't explain this. This message didn't show up randomly. It found you. And if you feel slightly uncomfortable right now, good. That's what activation feels like. Let me be very clear before we go further. This is not motivation. This is not self-help. This is not coincidence. This is a warning. Because once awareness hits, you are responsible. And this is a calling. A calling most people run from because it demands growth, discipline, and truth. Here's the twist nobody tells you. Spiritual gifts don't arrive with fireworks. They arrive disguised as pain, pressure, isolation, feeling misunderstood, feeling out of place in the world. That's why you've questioned yourself. That's why you felt like you don't belong anywhere. That's why your life didn't follow a normal path. You weren't lost. You were being separated. But here's the danger. If you ignore this moment, if you scroll past this message, if you convince yourself, this isn't for me, the gift doesn't disappear. It just stays locked. And locked gifts turn into anxiety, frustration, emotional exhaustion, constant feeling of something missing. That's not random. That's resistance. Now listen, what happens in the next 30 minutes is not entertainment. By the end of this video, you will know exactly which spiritual gift is yours. Not guessing, not hoping, knowing. And once you know, you can never unknow it. That's why some people should click away now. Because once this activates, your life will not go back to normal. Responsibility increases. Awareness sharpens. Comfort zones collapse. But so does confusion. So before we continue, you need to make a decision. Not out loud, not to me, to yourself. If you're ready to stop running, ready to stop doubting, ready to stop shrinking, then lock this moment in. Comment right now, I am chosen. Don't overthink it, don't analyze it, type it. Because those who comment aren't just engaging, they're activating. And what comes next will separate those who were curious from those who were called. Let me be very clear, because this part matters more than you think. You didn't search for this video. You didn't plan to hear this. You didn't even expect it. This video found you. And no, that's not a metaphor. God does not waste timing. He does not miss targets. And He never calls by accident. Right now, at this exact moment, millions of people are scrolling, laughing, distracted, consuming noise. But you stopped. Not because you were bored, not because you were curious, because something inside you said, pay attention. That wasn't your mind. That was recognition. And here's the truth most people aren't ready to hear. When God wants to activate someone, He doesn't shout. He interrupts. That interruption you felt, that pause in your scrolling, that subtle pull, that was selection. Not luck, not coincidence, selection. Here's what most churches never explain clearly. Spiritual gifts are not random. They aren't handed out equally, they aren't given casually, and they aren't activated automatically. A spiritual gift stays silent until awareness hits, which means the moment you understand what you carry, your life splits. Two timelines form instantly, one where you awaken, one where you stay asleep. And here's the scary part, both timelines look normal at first. Same job, same people, same routine. But internally, one leads to clarity, the other leads to confusion. One leads to purpose, the other leads to quiet frustration. And most people choose the second, not because they want to, but because they're afraid of the responsibility that comes with the first. Now listen carefully, but here's the twist. Spiritual gifts don't arrive feeling powerful. They don't show up as confidence. They don't feel like strength. They feel like pressure with no explanation, pain that doesn't make sense, loneliness even in crowds, being misunderstood your entire life. That's how you know it's real. Because if the gift were easy, everyone would carry it. If the calling were comfortable, it wouldn't require courage. That's why you've always felt different. You didn't fit in growing up. You questioned things others accepted. You felt older than your age. You sensed things before they happened. And maybe you tried to suppress it. You tried to be normal. You tried to blend in. You tried to quiet that inner pull. But the calling never left. It just waited. Because God doesn't chase. He waits. And now you're here, which means the waiting period is over. Let me say something that might shake you. The discomfort you felt your whole life wasn't confusion. It was containment. Your environment couldn't hold what you were carrying yet, so it felt tight, restrictive, painful, and instead of recognizing it as preparation, you questioned yourself. But here's the truth. People with spiritual gifts are often isolated early, not to punish them, but to protect the gift. Because exposure too early can destroy what isn't trained. And here's another twist. The reason this message hits you differently is because you're at the edge between awakening and avoidance, activation and delay, calling and comfort, and make no mistake, there is no neutral here. Once awareness comes, you either move forward or you resist. And resistance always shows up as doubt, procrastination, distraction. I'll do this later. That's how people talk themselves out of destiny, but not you. If you were like everyone else, you wouldn't still be watching. You would have clicked away the moment things got serious, but you stayed, which tells me something important. Your spirit already knows what your mind is still questioning. And now comes the moment of choice. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. Before we go deeper, before we uncover the gifts, before activation begins, you must acknowledge the call, not to me, not to the algorithm, to yourself. Comment number 2. Right now. I accept my calling. Don't rush it. Don't joke about it. Type it with intention, because once you accept it, what comes next will start making sense. Here's the news nobody prepares you for. Spiritual gifts are not rewards. They are not prizes for good behavior. They are not trophies for being holy enough. They are not handed out to make life easier. They are responsibilities, heavy ones. And that's why God doesn't place them in comfort. He hides them in pressure. He buries them in struggle. He seals them inside experiences most people couldn't survive. Trauma, rejection, loss, isolation. That wasn't random. That was training. If you suffered deeply, if life hit you harder than others, you weren't being punished. You were being prepared. Let me say it slowly, because this changes everything. Your pain was preparation. The betrayal, preparation. The loneliness, preparation. The seasons where nothing made sense, preparation. Because spiritual gifts require depth, and depth is forged only in places comfort can't reach. Now listen carefully. But here's the twist. A spiritual gift doesn't just sit quietly if it's ignored. It doesn't disappear. It turns inward, and when that happens, the enemy uses the very gift God gave you against you. This is where most people get stuck, because an unactivated gift doesn't feel like power. It feels like a problem. Here's how it shows up. A healing gift turns into emotional exhaustion because you're absorbing everyone's pain without knowing how to release it. Discernment turns into anxiety because you sense danger everywhere but don't understand why. Leadership turns into control issues because you're trying to manage life instead of lead with purpose. Wisdom turns into overthinking because your mind sees too much with no direction, and you start thinking, what's wrong with me? Why am I like this? Why can't I just be normal? Here's the truth. Nothing is wrong with you. Nothing is broken. Nothing is missing. Something is asleep. Your gift is awake enough to create pressure, but not trained enough to create peace. And that tension you feel, that inner friction, that's not mental weakness. That's spiritual resistance. Because deep down, your soul knows you're carrying something you haven't stepped into yet. And the longer you delay activation, the louder that discomfort becomes. Here's something most people never realize. The enemy doesn't attack people with no potential. He attacks those with impact. That's why your life felt targeted. That's why setbacks came in patterns. That's why breakthroughs almost happened. But not quite. It wasn't bad luck. It was containment. Because if you activate the gift, you become dangerous. Dangerous to limitation. Dangerous to generational cycles. Dangerous to fear. So instead of stopping you outright, the strategy was subtler. Confuse you. Overwhelm you. Make you doubt yourself. Turn your gift into a burden so you never realize it's a weapon. But here's where everything changes. Awareness breaks the cycle. The moment you understand what you're carrying, the enemy loses leverage. Because now, the gift can be trained, directed, controlled, and suddenly, what once drained you starts empowering you. What once confused you starts guiding you. What once hurt you starts healing others. But only if you choose activation over avoidance. And make no mistake, this moment matters because some of you have been sitting at the edge for a long time, feeling the pull, ignoring the call, waiting for a better time. There is no better time. There is only response. And response is what separates those who stay stuck from those who step forward. Before we go any further, before we reveal the specific gifts, you need to declare something, not to me, not to anyone else, to yourself. Comment number 3. Right now, my gift is waking up. Type it slowly, mean it fully, because once you acknowledge it, the gift no longer works against you. It starts working through you. Now we get specific. This is where things stop being abstract and start becoming personal, because one of these is already active in you, even if you never had a name for it. And here's the warning before we continue. Once you recognize your gift, you can't pretend you don't have it anymore. Awareness removes excuses. Let's begin. Gift number 1, discernment. If this is your gift, you feel energy instantly. You walk into a room and something feels off, even when everyone is smiling. You sense lies without proof. You notice tone shifts. You catch inconsistencies others miss. Crowds drain you. Small talk exhausts you. You need silence to reset. And for a long time, you thought something was wrong with you. You thought you were too sensitive, overthinking, judgmental. But listen carefully. That's not weakness. That's spiritual radar. Discernment is the ability to perceive truth beyond words. It's why you've avoided situations that later turn toxic. It's why you've trusted your gut and been right more times than wrong. But here's the twist. Untrained discernment turns into fear. You start seeing danger everywhere. You become hypervigilant. You struggle to relax. That's not because the gift is bad. It's because it's untrained. When trained, discernment brings peace. When ignored, it brings anxiety. Gift number 2, healing. If this one is yours, people open up to you without knowing why. Strangers tell you their life story. Friends vent for hours. People feel lighter after being around you. Your presence calms others. You feel deeply. You absorb emotions, sometimes too much. And you've probably said this before. Why does everyone come to me? Because your spirit carries relief. That's not emotional weakness. That's assignment. Healers feel more because they are meant to restore. But here's the twist. If you don't learn boundaries, a healing gift turns into burnout. You give too much. You carry what isn't yours. You end up drained and empty. That's why some healers feel exhausted even when they're doing nothing. The gift is working, but without direction. When trained, healing brings renewal. When ignored, it brings depletion. Gift number 3, wisdom. This gift is subtle, but powerful. You see outcomes before they happen. You connect dots quickly. You understand people's motives instinctively. You give advice casually, and later, hear, how did you know that? You think deeply. You analyze patterns. You learn from observation. And you've probably been told, you think too much. No, that's not overthinking. That's divine insight. Wisdom is the ability to see beyond the moment. But here's the twist. Untrained wisdom turns into mental overload. You replay conversations. You carry responsibility for decisions that aren't yours. You feel pressure to always be right. That's why wisdom bearers often struggle with rest. But when trained, wisdom becomes guidance, not burden. The big reveal. Now listen carefully. If one of these descriptions felt uncomfortably accurate, that's not coincidence. That's recognition. These are the most common gifts because they are foundational. But here's the truth most people miss. A gift that isn't trained will always feel like a burden. That's why you felt overwhelmed. That's why life felt heavy. That's why you questioned yourself. The gift was active, but unmanaged. And unmanaged power always creates chaos. But today, that changes. Because awareness is the first step to mastery. Before we move to the next gifts, the rarer ones, you must make a decision, not to the video, to your calling. Comment number 4. Right now, I am ready to train my gift. Type it with intention, because once you commit to training, your gift stops draining you and starts defining you. Now listen carefully. This is where the message narrows. Not everyone watching this will resonate with what comes next. And that's intentional, because these gifts are rare. They are not common. They are not comfortable. And they do not allow a normal life. If one of these hits you, your life will never be ordinary again. There's no halfway with these gifts. You either accept them or spend your life resisting them. Let's begin. Gift number 4, prophecy. If this is your gift, your words carry weight. You've spoken things casually that later came true, not because you planned it, but because you saw it before others did. You sense timing. You feel urgency. You know when something is about to shift. Sometimes you speak and people react strongly, even when you didn't mean to provoke. That's because prophetic words don't just inform, they expose. And exposure makes people uncomfortable. You've probably been told, watch what you say. You're intense. You're too serious. But here's the truth. Prophecy isn't about predicting the future. It's about revealing truth in the present. But here's the twist. If prophecy is suppressed, it turns inward. You start doubting your voice. You second-guess what you know. You stay silent to keep peace. And silence slowly suffocates this gift. Unspoken prophecy becomes frustration. That's why you felt a pressure in your chest when you didn't speak up. Gift number 5, leadership. This gift is obvious, even when you try to hide it. People naturally follow you. They listen when you speak. They look to you for direction. Even when you don't want the role, it finds you. You've probably avoided leadership because you saw how heavy it is. Responsibility, criticism, loneliness at the top. But leadership doesn't ask permission. It activates under pressure. But here's the twist. Untrained leadership turns into control. You try to manage everything. You feel frustrated when others move slowly. You carry weight that isn't yours. That's why leaders often feel isolated. But trained leadership doesn't control, it guides. And when you stop resisting it, people rise instead of depend. Gift number 6, faith. This gift confuses people the most. You believe when logic says, that's impossible. You remain calm in chaos. You trust when others panic. You've been called unrealistic, too hopeful, naive. But faith isn't ignorance. It's vision beyond evidence. You see what doesn't exist yet. But here's the twist. Faith invites pressure. Because when you believe, you're tested. Again, and again, and again. That's why your life felt harder than others. Which brings us to the truth most people never realize. People with rare gifts are attacked the most, not because they're weak, because they're dangerous. Dangerous to fear, dangerous to limitation, dangerous to generational patterns. You weren't cursed, you were targeted. The resistance you felt was confirmation, because no one attacks what carries no impact. And that's why you tried to hide. You dimmed your voice, you avoided visibility, you stayed small to stay safe. But here's the reality. Hiding doesn't protect rare gifts. It stalls them. And stalled gifts create internal chaos. Which is why this moment matters. You're being asked, not forced, to step forward. Before we move on, you must make a declaration. This one is critical, not to me, not to the comments, to your calling. Comment number 5, very important. I will not hide anymore. Type it slowly, mean it fully. Because rare gifts require rare courage. And once you stop hiding, everything changes. Now slow down. This is not hype. This is not excitement. This is warning territory. Because the gifts we're about to talk about are not just powerful. They are dangerous if handled without discipline. These gifts don't just change individuals. They change families. They change bloodlines. They change generations. But here's the truth. Most people don't want to hear. The same gifts that elevate the obedient can destroy the unprepared. That's why not everyone receives them, and that's why they come with pressure. Let's begin. Gift number 7, miracles. If this is your gift, things work out for you unnaturally. Doors open at the last second. Resources appear when logic says they shouldn't. Situations reverse without explanation. You've experienced impossible turnarounds, and people say, you're lucky. No, that's not luck. That's alignment. Miracle carriers shift environments without force. But here's the danger. But here's the final twist. If pride enters, miracles stop. Because miracles are not about the person, they are about obedience. The moment you take credit, the flow cuts off. That's why some people see miracles once and never again. The gift withdraws when ego replaces humility. Gift number 8, teaching. This gift looks calm, but it's incredibly powerful. You simplify complex truths effortlessly. You break down deep concepts so others can understand. People say, "You explain things so clearly." That's not communication skill, that's assignment. Teachers don't just share information, they unlock understanding. But here's the danger. Untrained teachers become prideful. They start teaching for applause. They seek recognition over impact. They speak without listening. And the moment teaching becomes performance, the gift loses authority. True teaching requires humility. You must stay teachable to remain effective. Gift number 9, tongues/spiritual language. This is the most misunderstood gift. If this is yours, your spiritual sensitivity is heightened. You feel connected deeply. You sense presence. You experience communication beyond words. This gift operates in intimacy. It's not meant for display. It's meant for alignment. But here's the danger. When this gift is exposed to ego, it fractures. Because spiritual language requires surrender, not control. And that's why many people fear this gift. It demands purity of intention. The final truth. Now listen carefully. These gifts do not activate with desire. They do not respond to ego. They do not operate for attention. They activate with obedience, quiet obedience, consistent obedience, unseen obedience. That's why some people never access them, not because they aren't worthy, but because they want power without discipline. And discipline is the price. Let me say this clearly. If pride enters, the gift shuts down. No warning, no drama, just silence. That's why this section matters. You are being tested, not judged. Tested for readiness. Because once these gifts activate, there is no casual mode. They require integrity, humility, responsibility. And now you understand why your life has required so much restraint. You weren't being delayed. You were being qualified. We're almost at the end. And what comes next is confirmation, not hype, not encouragement. Confirmation. Stay with me. This is your confirmation, not a suggestion, not a coincidence, not something to think about later. A confirmation. If you're still watching this video right now, through distractions, notifications, doubts, you are chosen. And that word isn't poetic, it's precise. God does not reveal spiritual gifts to people who would waste them. He doesn't awaken power in people who only want comfort. He doesn't give clarity to those who plan to stay small. The fact that you stayed until this moment means something inside you already decided. You didn't need convincing, you needed permission. And this is it. From today forward, some things must end. You stop doubting what you feel. You stop shrinking your voice. You stop apologizing for depth. You stop explaining yourself to people who were never meant to understand you. That chapter is over because awareness changes responsibility. Once you know who you are, playing small becomes disobedience. Let that settle. You weren't late to life. You weren't behind. You weren't broken. You were hidden. Hidden while you matured. Hidden while you learned restraint. Hidden while your character caught up to your capacity. And now the hiding season ends. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been. Here's something most people never realize. Confirmation doesn't feel loud. It feels calm, clear, grounded. That quiet certainty you feel right now, that's alignment. And alignment always comes right before movement, which means after today, things will shift. Not all at once, not dramatically, but unmistakably. You'll start seeing clearly. You'll feel less conflicted. You'll say no without guilt. You'll stop chasing validation. Because when you accept the calling, you stop negotiating your worth. But here's the final truth, and this part matters. Activation requires response, not tomorrow, not someday, now. Because moments like this pass, not because God takes them away, but because people talk themselves out of them. They scroll, they hesitate, they minimize what they felt, and the window closes quietly. But not for you. You stayed. So now comes the ceiling. This is not about comments for engagement. This is about declaration. Speaking aligns the internal with the external. So if you're serious, if you're done circling the same cycles, if you're ready to step into clarity, then do not skip this. Final engagement. Bomb. Do not rush this comment. All 5. Yes, all 5. Not 1, not 2, all of them. 1. I am chosen. 2. I accept my calling. 3. My gift is waking up. 4. I am ready. 5. I will not hide. Type them slowly. Read them as you type, because words create alignment. Those who comment all 5 are not just participating. They are sealing this activation. This is the line. Before it, confusion. After it, clarity. Ignore this moment. And the opportunity passes. Not forever, but long enough to feel the weight of delay. And I don't think you came this far to turn back now. This wasn't entertainment. This wasn't motivation. This wasn't a feel-good message. This was activation. And what happens next depends on what you do right now.